Welcome back. The Me Too movement has been a hot topic of discussion, especially with the Harvey Weinstein being sentenced to 23 years in prison earlier this week.
Our next guest is a top Maryland and DC-based employment and labor law attorney who's here ready to talk about what you can do if you're experiencing sexual harassment in the workplace and if there can be forgiveness and second chances. We welcome Joyce Smithy to Virginia this morning. It's great to see you.
Wonderful to be here.
I feel like I can hear everybody saying, nope, no second chances and no forgiveness. So that's going to be an interesting part of this conversation.
Sure, it will be.
Starting at the beginning, though, you know, if you're experiencing sexual harassment in the workplace, I think a big part of getting to that is really acknowledging that it's happening, right? We seem to talk ourselves out of that for quite some time.
Right. So as it's happening to you, you're having to deal with unwelcome conduct, but at the same time, knowing however you respond to it is going to potentially impact your career. Mm-hmm. And so it's this complex problem solving, and sometimes it's just easier to say, well, hopefully this will get better, and hard to come to the realization that it's a problem you have to tackle.
Yeah. So once you realize that you do need to tackle it, what are the steps? Where do you begin, and who do you talk to first?
Sure. Some people do talk to the harasser, but that should only happen if you're comfortable with that. If you're in a company that has an HR department, that can be a good place to go. Certainly, if your company has a handbook, there will be policies that will talk about anti-harassment and a complaint policy that should outline at least 2 different people that you can go to complain. And so get that policy book and follow it so that your employer can be your partner in remedying the situation.
Joyce, I feel like I've gone well past go and collected $200 on this thought process of, let me take a step back, talking to the harasser. Now, number one, I would think a lot of the times this is happening verbally. It might be things that are said or inferred. Mm-hmm. And so then you're supposed to take time to stop and say something to this person. And then, I mean, frankly, it's not on the record at that point.
It isn't, and that's an excellent point. You really only do that if you're comfortable. I do meet some women in my practice who say, I don't think he understands it's wrong, and I'm worried that it'll be worse if I go around him, and I think he'll behave better if I point it out because I don't think he understands it. So I meet women who are comfortable taking it on themselves, but if you're not, absolutely find somebody else to help you handle and navigate that.
Yeah. Now, what do you do, especially for people who might be in smaller companies that don't necessarily have a well-written plan? How do you address that?
Sure. So I would look for somebody in management who has some decision-making authority and go to them and let them understand what's happening to you. And again, if they don't know how to handle it, they can certainly hire someone who does. And if your company really has no ability to handle it, no desire to handle it, we certainly have many agencies, the EEOC, there are local and state agencies that you can go to who will investigate the issue for you.
It's a good time right now to familiarize yourself with what that policy is.
Yes.
I would imagine most all companies have this, right? And then, I just sort of have conditioned myself when there's something happening, you're going to communicate with your HR partner. I think they should be first and foremost.
I think that's right. That's usually who you see designated in your policy, but it may be your supervisor. If you have a great relationship with your supervisor and it's a coworker, you may go straight to your supervisor and say, hey, I have a problem. And again, that's why you want these policies to designate 2 different people so that you have some choices. And also, if your supervisor's the harasser, you should have someone other than the supervisor to go to.
Absolutely.
Right. And so, do you put it in writing right away? Do you have the conversation first and then follow up in writing? I feel like you need to write something down, but at what point should you feel comfortable doing that?
Yeah, you're right on. I think documentation is really important. If these things escalate to court, these things get tried a year, 2 years later, memories fade, and the documents can really dominate what a jury may think of it. So you can memorialize it in writing, but you don't have to do it in a confrontational way. You can say, thank you so much for meeting with me about my concerns about, this individual and the harassment, and I really appreciate that you're going to investigate it. Let me know what you need. Friendly email, but you just, set a nice record of what the issue is, you complained about it, and they have agreed to investigate it.
Joyce, going back to that policy question, is this universal in every type of workplace? I mentioned, go to the HR person. What if you're a small business and you are wearing all of those hats? Or maybe you're working instead of private sector, you're a federal employee or a government employee.
Sure. Well, the government employees, state, federal, usually have their own EEO departments. They have very clear policies, and in some cases have their own investigation process before you can go to the EEOC. For federal employees, they do. If you're at a small company, you should hope that the owner and manager can take responsibility for it. I will say that most of the laws that address sexual harassment require at least 15 employees, Title VII, and then the age discrimination and disability discrimination laws, 15 employees or more to have liability. Still, it doesn't mean if you're a small employer, you don't want to take action to make sure your workplace is free of harassment.
Mm-hmm. With this being top of mind for most people, do you feel like this is getting more effectively navigated? Are we aware earlier? And maybe that's just hopeful, wishful thinking.
Yeah, I think certainly I've seen people more willing to speak up and more willing to follow complaint processes. So I'm seeing that, but I also see a little bit of a backlash to the Me Too movement of managers who are afraid now to have closed door meetings. They're so afraid of being accused of something, and so we've got to manage all of this in a reasonable way so that we're still providing opportunities for people to meet with have meetings behind closed doors when they're necessary, and not approach it with a sense of fear.
Great insight. Thank you so much for being with us.
Sure, my pleasure.
Appreciate it. For more information on this topic or the Smithy Law Firm, we'll have a post on our website later this afternoon, WTVR.com/VTM, with a direct link.